Hello, hello. Hi, gang. Here is your Tuesday poll question at Smerconish.com. Does Barack Obama have any obligation to be more visible in his opposition to Donald Trump? Does former President Obama have an obligation to be more visible in his opposition to President Donald Trump? Thank you to my friends at Parks Casino. I'm a huge music person. Music is a really important part of my life, and I've always enjoyed going to see live shows. The Excite Center at Parks Casino, they've got it all coming up. So close, by the way, located in the Philly burbs, close to New Jersey, less than 2 hours from New York, less than an hour from Delaware. Here we go. How about July the 3rd, WXPN welcoming Gary Clark Jr., September 6th, UB40, September 20, Australian Pink Floyd, the Wish You Were Here 50th anniversary tour. Wow. September 26th, I don't know much about this. The Revivalists, roots rock with a modern twist. The tour is called All in the Family 10 Years of Men Amongst Mountains. That sounds intriguing. This I know a little bit more about. October 4, Classic Rockers, Kansas, the Psychedelic Furs, and guest Gary Newman. Everclear, Sparkle and Fade 30th anniversary tours in the fall. Almost Queen, a tribute to, guess who, Queen. Bill Murray and his Blood Brothers on November 15 for one night only. Whatever you're looking for, it is coming to Parks Casino. Go to parkscasino.com. You've got to be 21. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. Thank you, Parks. Huge voting yesterday. I have to say, I was so pleasantly surprised with this because I wanted to ask the question and something said to me, there might not be much interest in this one, but I wanted to pursue it anyway. Which factor is more responsible for the rise in political violence at residences? Your choices were political polarization and easy online access to personal data. Running away with the votes was political polarization, 83.31%. The huge voting, 37,616 for a Monday. Huge. Don Mihalik is an old friend of mine. He's a former Secret Service agent, senior Secret Service agent. He was assigned to two presidential details. I guess it would have been W and Obama. Yeah, I guess I met him on W's watch and then became more friendly with he and his wife Val through the Garden of Reflection 9/11 Remembrance in Bucks County on Obama's watch. But he was a great guest yesterday. Now he's a consultant for ABC. And he wrote a piece yesterday for ABC on all the political violence. The lawmaker shootings in Minnesota are a disturbing trend. His co-author was Richard Frankel, a former FBI agent. And talking about a Chapman University study, Don and his co-author wrote this. As the study points out, the digital age with its access to the dark web, violent online content, and the ease with which individuals can identify public officials, their residences, their activities, has created unprecedented targeting opportunities. And this helps explain the observed increase in violence across all levels of government, including state and local officials, a trend, unfortunately, that appears to be continuing. It's very, very hard to protect soft targets. What are soft targets? Soft targets are the residences of those who serve. And I read aloud yesterday, and I'll do it again for you now on radio, the page one above the fold New York Times coverage on political violence written by Lisa Lair, because I thought this really brought home the significance of the problem. The statements of shock and condolences streamed in eerily, one after another on Saturday afternoon. The assassination of a Minnesota lawmaker and her husband, and the attempted murder of another lawmaker and his wife. Quote, horrible news, said Representative Steve Scalise, himself shot at a baseball game in 2017. Or there was, Paul and I are heartbroken, said former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, whose husband was bludgeoned with a hammer in 2022. Or, my family and I know the horror of a targeted shooting all too well, said former Representative Gabby Giffords, who was shot in the head in 2011. In the past 3 months alone, a man set fire to the Pennsylvania governor's residence while Mr. Shapiro and his family were asleep inside. Another man gunned down a pair of workers from the Israeli embassy outside an event in Washington. Protesters calling for the release of Israeli hostages in Boulder, Colorado were set on fire. And the Republican Party headquarters in New Mexico and a Tesla dealership near Albuquerque were firebombed. And that's an incomplete list. It's a problem. And by the way, one update, and we have it in the newsletter today on this Tuesday, one update relative to Minnesota is that the alleged, I mean, it seems like there's a pretty strong case, but okay, the alleged gunman, the alleged murderer, that he also visited the homes of two other state legislators. One who was away on vacation, and the second where a police officer came upon him. So it could have been even worse. It could have been even worse. The Tuesday poll question, the poll question today at Smerconish.com. Sip of coffee. Does Barack Obama have any obligation to be visible in his opposition to Donald Trump? Why am I asking this today? Well, first of all, a couple of things. Yesterday was the 10-year anniversary. Yesterday, June 16, 2015, the 10-year anniversary of Donald Trump coming down that escalator at Trump Tower on Fifth Avenue. That's when it all began. And he has dominated our politics, for better or worse, but he has dominated our politics ever since that day. And he will dominate our politics until he passes. I don't wish him ill. I'm just making the observation. Listen, I worked for former Philadelphia Mayor Frank Rizzo, who was elected in 1971. And for every election thereafter, until he died in the midst of the 1991 cycle, 20 years, whether his name was on the ballot or not, he dominated those mayoral races. And Donald Trump is having the exact same influence. You might find this interesting. I'm going to read this and talk about this more extensively on radio today. But I was curious to know. I have a distinct recollection. I haven't been able to find it, but I have a distinct recollection of media accounts one day after Trump's announcement 10 years ago yesterday, speaking of the need for staffers to go out on Fifth Avenue and corral tourists just to build the crowd. And then he comes down the escalator and he goes on the stage. I just watched the video again this morning. And he said, oh my God, look at the thousands of people. Like, some things have not changed. Give him credit for consistency. I was just curious to see, like, what was the coverage like? So Alexander Burns, who's been a guest of mine, writing for the New York Times 10 years ago yesterday, Donald J. Trump, the garrulous real estate developer whose name has adorned apartment buildings, hotels, Trump-branded neckties, and Trump-branded steaks, announced on Tuesday his entry into the 2016 presidential race, brandishing his wealth and fame as chief qualifications in an improbable quest for the Republican nomination. So there's that. And then reflecting, and this is in what I'm about to share with you, is in today's Doing the Weave. We're doing the weave. What is in today's newsletter includes a piece from CNN that was written by Aaron Blake. And this is a synopsis of the 10 years and the 10 ways in which Trump has dominated and changed our politics for the last decade. And within this discussion of Trump, there is also this observation, one of the bullet points, that Trump's tenure has marked the decline of Democrats. Whether through happenstance, the Democrats' own failings, or Trump's ability to block out the sun, the Trump era has left a remarkable vacuum in Democratic leadership. And the analysis says that the Obama, Biden, and they're older, Obama not as much, but they're not going to have their shot again. Their shoes haven't been filled. Their shoes have not been filled, as evidenced by the fact that Democrats, went to Biden in 2020 and then back to Biden in 2024, of course, until he dropped out and Harris came along. So that leads me to Obama and Mark Leibovich, and a piece that Mark Leibovich wrote for The Atlantic. Mark Leibovich, who's the author of 5 New York Times best-selling books. Where is Barack Obama? The audacity of hope presidency has given way to the fierce lethargy of semi-retirement. And Mark Leibovich will be on today's radio program in the third hour. I think he's terrific. He speaks as well as he writes. And it raises an interesting question. A question of, in these times where it's very tumultuous, very controversial, and as you saw from the thousands, the tens of thousands, I guess I could say the hundreds of thousands who came out for the No Kings protests last weekend all across the country, the opposition to Donald Trump is fired up, but leaderless. And Leibovich is wondering, like, where's Obama? Because there's not another person on the Democratic side of the aisle who enjoys his level of popularity. And does he have an obligation to be doing more? Or are you of the mindset like the guy, did his 8 years and is entitled to do whatever he wants right now? There's also an interesting question. Well, I'll raise that in just a moment. Yeah. He begins the piece by saying, last month, while Donald Trump was in the Middle East being gifted $400 million in a luxury jet from Qatar, Barack Obama headed off on his own foreign excursion, a trip to Norway, in a much smaller and more tasteful jet to visit the summer estate of his old friend King Harold V. Together, they would savor genteel glories. They chewed over global affairs and the freshest salmon, which had been smoked on the premises and seasoned with herbs from the royal garden. And it goes on to present a picture of what is Obama's life like at this stage. And it sounds terrific. Obama pops in with summer and year-end book and music and film recommendations. In normal times, no one would deny Obama these diversions. He's performed the world's most stressful job for 8 years, served his country, made his history, deserves to kick back and do the usual ex-president things, start a foundation, build a library, make unspeakable amounts of money. But the inevitable Trump-era counterpoint is that these are not normal times. So I'm asking today, does he have any sense of obligation? Should he feel some sense of obligation to step forth and be the leader of the opposition to Donald Trump? And at the same time that I ask that, it occurs to me, well, two things. One, would it make any difference? I mean, he was out there for Kamala Harris. He delivered a hell of a speech at the Democratic National Convention. I'll play some elements of that today on radio as well, reinforcing his oratory skills. So I'm asking the question, does he have an obligation? I'm mindful of the question of whether, if he were to do what Mark Leibovich advances, would it make any difference? Would anybody listen? And number three, which has to be said, I don't know that he'll vote for today's poll question, but if he were to vote, the person that I can think of who would be saying, yes, please get Obama back out onto the gridiron would be Donald Trump. Right? I mean, it's at this point, I tune him out when he complains about Biden. And I say that recognizing that today there's going to be some kind of a fakakta hearing on Capitol Hill about, Biden's decline. I think we all get it now. The books needed to be written. The historical record needed to be certified. It is. I'm not a believer in somebody manipulating, the auto sign pen. But every time that Trump now talks about Biden, all I think of is Joe Biden's a guy fighting cancer. Like, give him a break already. He needs an opponent. Trump, needs an opponent. That's his MO. You want to talk about what we've learned for the last 10 years? We've learned that Trump needs an opponent. And Barack Obama, all of a sudden coming back to be the face of the opposition would probably be right in Trump's wish list. Finally, I'll just say this. I thought of an alternative poll question. I think I've done it before, but that doesn't stop me from doing it again because our opinions and attitudes change over time. And that is the 2028 fantasy matchup. The 2028 fantasy matchup. If Trump can get beyond the constitutional limitation on 2 terms, then I guess Obama can as well. And why don't we just let the two of them go toe to toe? Who wins that election? Have some fun. Vote on today's poll question, the Tuesday poll question at Smerconish.com. Does Barack Obama have any obligation to be more visible in his opposition to Donald Trump? like and subscribe. And I hope you've already set yourself up for notifications so that when I'm here on YouTube, you can be a part of the action. Thank you, gang. Go vote on the poll question. I think it's a fun one today. See ya.